invite Mr. Ifti Islam up again to give a presentation on energy, power, and infrastructure. So Ifti, the floor is yours.
Okay, we'll just wait for the... Right. So I think I probably only have 5-10 minutes because I'm giving a quick overview of the energy sector, and then we have a video from GE, and then we'll have another small presentation about the opportunities in the water sector in Bangladesh. Then we'll have a very distinguished panel discussion as well. So just before I go through the structure of the energy sector, it is no exaggeration to say that there is an overwhelming consensus in Bangladesh that the number one constraint on the economy is energy and infrastructure. In fact, some economists have estimated that, the World Bank has estimated that Bangladesh is losing 2% GDP growth per year as a result of insufficient energy production. So it's for a sector which has such an overwhelming consensus of opinion that there should be investment. One of the real challenges and maybe paradoxes is why we've failed to generate capacity in the energy sector. But this gives you a summary of the major players in the energy sector in Bangladesh. And again, I think we're going to email you the presentation, so I'll go through it later on. But Power Division, Ministry of Power, Energy and Mineral Resources is the supervisory government authority. Power Cell, Power Division, Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission, BERC, and we have the Bangladesh Power Development Board. We have IPPs, independent power producers, RPPs, rental power producers, and captive power. So again, a significant increase in private sector participation. Again, it's a little bit busy, this slide, but essentially, as a matter of kind of summary, Bangladesh suffers from about a 2,000 megawatt power deficit, which so just over 6,000 megawatts of power demand and just over 4,000 megawatts of power generation. Now, the government has added around 1,000 megawatts, or is in the process of adding 1,000 megawatts over the course of this year. So I think that gap you can see in that bottom left-hand side chart should begin to close over the next couple of years. So it seems to have. And one challenge for Bangladesh is the need to shift is fuel diversification. So you can see that pie chart there. 75, some estimates, almost 80% of Bangladesh power generation comes from the gas, and one of the reasons, a contributory factor behind load shedding and lack of power generation is insufficient gas. So there needs to be a lot of investment in gas exploration from BAPEX and as well from the private sector. There also needs to be investment in compressors in the gas distribution systems. We're going to address that in the discussion. We'll also have some feedback from some of our distinguished panelists on what the primary fuel source diversification opportunity is. Should we stick to gas? Should we move towards import oil? Should we develop our coal fields? Should we move to nuclear? So that'll be part of the discussion as well. So this top slide shows the government's power sector master plan and a very ambitious agenda. So they're looking to add in 2011, as I said, more than about 1,200 megawatts of rental power, which is relatively expensive. But then from 2012 onwards, you're going to be seeing substantial additions in private sector power generation as well as public sector. In fact, the Vice Chairman of Summit Group, Farid Khan, is one of our distinguished panelists, and they're generating 3 of IPPs with, I think, almost 1,400 megawatts of additional capacity. So hopefully we're at the juncture of a major increase in power generation. And in terms of the infrastructure outside of power, these are all very long-term projects in terms of hard infrastructure. And again, because of time constraints, I wouldn't dwell too much in this latter section of the presentation. Maybe you could look through it when we email it to you. But I try here to talk about the infrastructure paradox, but also that if you look at our neighbor India, in the current 5-year plan, India is investing $500 billion in infrastructure, and it's expected to be coming up to $1 trillion in the next 5-year plan. By comparison, India's GDP is around 12 times that of Bangladesh, and its population is 8 times that of Bangladesh. So, if India can do it, and India is doing it through PPP, Bangladesh should be able to as well. Anyway, let me skip going through the rest of the presentation in detail, but some of the things that we'll maybe touch upon in the panel discussion. One of the themes that we can consider, and what makes the Indian infrastructure sector so dynamic, is what we have is an infrastructure ecosystem. So that's what we lack to some extent in Bangladesh. So an ecosystem is both major infrastructure players. We have Summit, but we need to have more major infrastructure players in Bangladesh. We need to have an enabling regulatory environment that helps generate a project pipeline. We need to have bankable projects. So in the case of Bangladesh, realistic energy pricing is very, very important. And then we also need to have an effective infrastructure financing capacity, both in terms of domestic financing and international financing as well. Obviously, there's quite a lot to cover. But I think one of the things that, again, we can talk about maybe in the panel discussion is the need to build domestic infrastructure financing capacity. The government in the June 2009 budget announced a PPP program. I was quite closely involved in designing that PPP program, so I can answer some questions in the panel discussion. So and again, one of the challenges, one of the paradoxes of Bangladesh, that PPP in Bangladesh was formulated probably in the fastest formulation of PPP of any country in the world. I think from saying, hey, PPP is a good idea, which was the end of April 2009, it came into the budget in June 2009. So in 2 or 3 months, we had a PPP program. The government allocated $350 million in the budget. There was a viability gap fund, a technical assistance fund, and about $310 million for a Bangladesh infrastructure fund. Despite that, PPP has not been operationalized in the last 2 years. And again, it's worth discussing in the panel discussion, why is PPP, what are the constraints for PPP to be operationalized in Bangladesh? Why is it not moving ahead? And I can give some perspective, but I'm sure our panelists will give lots of color on that. Just flick through here. This last slide is actually not. I like the slide, but it's actually not as relevant to. Very tenuous link to the energy sector, but this just shows oil per capita in different countries during their phases of industrialization. So it shows oil per capita in the U.S. And then you look at Japan, Korea, and then China and India. The only relevant, I think, it's an interesting slide about per capita oil consumption during rapid economic change and transformation. But I think the relevance for Bangladesh is, I think I mentioned in the presentation earlier that maybe in the short term, I think there's some downside risk to oil prices if the global economy moves into recession. But when you take the next 10-year view, it seems extremely likely to me, given the rapid industrialization in China, India, and the rest of the emerging markets, that structurally oil prices will remain quite well supported over the longer term. And so again, Bangladesh needs to take that into account and increase both the efficiency of energy production, but also be much more effective in terms of energy conservation and energy efficiency. So again, given time constraints, let me not talk too much longer, because I want to give plenty of time for the panel discussion. I think now we're going to have a video from one of our platinum sponsors, GE, I believe, and then we'll have the presentation on the water sector, and then the panel discussion. So can the AV experts bring up the GE video? you. Well, let me now, I'm delighted to invite onto the stage to give his presentation Engineer Wadud Huyen, who's the Additional Director General of Planning for the Bangladesh Water Development Board. And I must say, I'm somebody that has focused typically much more on the energy sector. I'm delighted that I'm going to hear a bit more about the water opportunities in water, since many of you, if you're not aware, Bangladesh is one of the most riverine countries in the world, and I think the opportunity to developing infrastructure in the water sector, I think, is relatively underappreciated. So let me.
Good morning and welcome you all to the presentation on Capital Dredging and Land Reclamation Program in Bangladesh under the Ministry of Water Resources. Bangladesh emerged as an independent nation in 1971 under the